to introduce Cathie tonight. It's a very interesting subject. Cathie is the International Chairman of the Eagle Forum and a member of the National Eagle Forum Board of Directors. She was the former president of the Dallas Eagle Forum and the president of the Eagle Forum for 16 years. Cathie was also the chair of the Texas Republican Party in 2009. She's a full-time volunteer. Cathie is married to Dr. Homer Adams and has one son and 5 grandchildren. It is my pleasure to introduce Cathie. Please welcome Cathie Adams.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight, and I'm especially pleased. I'll try and stand where I can be out of your way so that you can see the screen. I'm so glad that Judge Keith is here, because this is going to be impacting typically the county level more than others, and it's really a wonderful thing that you have someone who voluntarily comes to a meeting to learn, so that he can be accountable to you. So I think, after saying that, that is when the applause line should happen. But we have to back up a little bit on how in the world do we get into something called Agenda 21 as Americans? What is it? Where is it coming from? And I think the first thing that you need to understand is that someone by the name of Mikhail Gorbachev, there are a lot of young people here, but you remember who Mikhail Gorbachev was? Yeah. He has let the cat out of the bag. You don't know. Okay, come on. He has let the cat out of the bag. He said the key to the New World Order, is a climactic catastrophe of some sort. And so, just think about it for a second. If someone wants to regulate the air that you breathe out, which is not a pollutant, by the way. Some people we would swear it might be, but it's not. And it also happens to be the same air that is emitted when fossil fuels burn, carbon dioxide. It's not a pollutant. As a matter of fact, the more carbon dioxide there is in the air, the more plants and trees grow. And then the more they grow, the more they emit what? All right, okay. So, if somebody wants to create a catastrophe, though, using climate, in order to make that the key for turning its crank on the New World Order. So you can know that right up front, and know also that the new agenda is not really different from the old one, except that it's like a watermelon. It's green on the outside, it's still red on the inside. Okay, so the United Nations began in earnest with all of this, with what is called Earth Summits. And there have been 4 of them, actually. The first one was in 1972. And the Secretary General of that meeting was a man by the name of Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong is a very good friend of Mikhail Gorbachev. And you'll see a little bit more about that in a moment. And then 20 years later, they met in Rio de Janeiro. And that was the Earth Summit 2. And we had a president to attend that one, and so we'll talk about that in a moment. And then the third one was in Johannesburg, South Africa. And at that one, you'll be very interested to know that something called an Earth Charter was presented at this Earth Summit meeting, an Earth Charter. And the Earth Charter is composed mostly by the global-minded, including Gorbachev, and people like Soros and those kind of characters. But it was encased in something that looks very much like the Ark of the Covenant. And anyone who is a Christian or a Jew understands the Ark of the Covenant is something that is extremely important to our faith and extremely significant to our faith. And so what in the world are they putting in Ark of the Covenant, and why would it be that important to them? Well, the big one is coming next year, and we can look at the next slide. The next meeting is going to go back to Rio de Janeiro. So it's going to be called Rio Plus 20. The first one, 1992, the second one, 2012. And so that's coming next year. That's when a lot of things, they hope to seal the deal on a lot of different things that we'll talk about. Maurice Strong, I promised that we would get back to him because he was the Secretary General of both Earth Summit 1 in 72 and Earth Summit 2 in 1992. But I want you to understand something about his philosophy. And you can see a quote here. He says, current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class. He's not talking about those who make even $250,000 or more. He's talking about the middle class, you and me, not those up there making millions. Those affluent middle class involving high meat intake. Oh my goodness. They tried taking away my T-bone. They're going to have to try. Use of fossil fuels, there we go with the climate change, which by the way, we all know that it was global warming, and then they found that the globe was actually cooling, and so they had to come up with a new phrase, and now they call it climate change. Is the climate change? Yeah, it changes. Okay, always happens. And appliances, home and work air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. Not sustainable. So this lifestyle that you and I enjoy is not sustainable. We're going to learn more about what sustainable means in a moment. Social justice is what Maurice Strong called that. It's what people like Gorbachev and so many others. As a matter of fact, there was an American college student, and this is the girl's picture that you see on her t-shirt that I took. That was last December in Cancun, Mexico. You see, when the United Nations meets, they go to the Mayan Riviera, or to Durban this December, or some other exotic place. They don't go to Kodo. And so this was in Cancun. This girl is working her hardest. For what? For social justice, and here's how she defined it. Liberate the soil. Oh, we shouldn't have farmers? Undam the rivers. I mean, what happens with, all of that? Well, we've seen what happens. In California, they shut out water as they're undamming rivers. Freeing the people. Well, yeah, we believe in freedom. And unplug the empire. Now, what empire do you think they're talking about? They're talking about us. So this is social justice in a nutshell. Let's move on to the next one. It's also sustainable development. Now, after that first Earth Summit in 1972, there needed to be a shot in the arm because nothing was happening very fast. And the United Nations wanted to do something to boost the ideas that came out of that 1972 meeting. So in 1987, which would have been obviously 15 years later, then the World Commission on Environment and Development met. And the person who was leading that, I feel like I'm going in and out. Yeah.
Cathie, we'll get you another microphone.
Okay, we'll just change mics. It might be better. That's all right. Thank you so much. Anyway, and so the woman who headed this meeting was Gro Harlem Brundtland. And so the meeting was also called the...
Sorry, that was me.
Was also called the Brundtland Commission. And they came up with this document called Our Common Future, and also for the first time ever coined the phrase sustainable development. Now you saw what Maurice Strong said was not sustainable. So the jargon was moving, but it wasn't coined until this 1987 meeting. And Gro Harlem Brundtland, this Norwegian, also happens to be the vice president of the World Socialist Society. So very much in keeping with the ideals of Gorbachev and Maurice Strong. And in it, Gro Harlem Brundtland made very clear that the changing of attitudes, the attitudes of people everywhere, is a fundamental prerequisite if the priorities of human society and therefore human government are to be rewritten. So they're making absolutely no secret that exactly what Gorbachev said, that creating a climactic disaster, even if it's only in our minds, is the key to the New World Order. You can see why. She's making it very clear that we want to rewrite our governments. Sustainable development, as I said, was created at that 1987 meeting, and what is it? You can see a picture up here in the top right-hand corner. It is, you've seen social justice. Well, they want to combine economic justice and environmental justice as well. So it's all three of those things. And you can also submit the word equity. So you either are going to have justice or equity, in their minds, it's the same thing. So social justice is the same thing as social equity, and environmental justice, environmental equity. But the United Nations has a very clean definition for sustainable development. It is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, who in the world would want to use up all the oil today so that 50 years from now there would be no oil left? I mean, that's just not fair. But you know, children are being taught in classrooms that if you are going to live unsustainably, then there won't be anything left for their futures. And I have to tell you, I've had parents and grandparents who've come up to me almost every time I've talked about this and said, you know, my child comes home and they're scared to death about this. They really do believe that we are going to use up all of the energy, all of the even food, so that in the future generations, and I see people shaking their heads, yeah, they've seen it and heard it from their children. So, but don't be taken in by the deceptive language. It doesn't sound, well, you know, what's wrong with their definition of sustainable development? It's the way it works.
Right.
It's the way it works. And that is that it's a framework of rules and regulations that limits the behavior of individuals, businesses, and organizations to those activities approved by government. In other words, most every activity that you as a citizen would want to undertake, the government would have to give approval. Now, we saw this going on, didn't we, in the USSR? And we defeated communism. But as I say, it's come back in this new form. Let me also tell you on sustainable development. There is actually a Rockefeller. I know most of us think that's just going to be some name out there in oblivion someplace. No, it's a real person. And when I was in Johannesburg, South Africa, at that 2002 meeting, I sat about 10 feet away from him and prayed that none of it would rub off. But he gave a 4-hour meeting, he and 3 others sitting on a panel, concerning sustainable development. And I thought, well, with Rockefeller's name involved in it, I gotta go see what this guy's got to say. Well, at the end of the meeting, if you can imagine this, and shoot anybody that ever does this to you, bow your heads and close your eyes. I mean, you may do that for faith purposes, but in a meeting when they're talking about sustainable development, and then after that, after they had bowed their heads and closed their eyes, and I looked around, I was the only person not doing it in the room. Yeah. And so at the end of that, they had microphones set up, and the people were to go to the microphones and tell everyone in the room, what did sustainable development look like? Nobody knew. Nobody knew. They all had different ideas, and the conclusion was, well, that's why we have to write so much more about this. So it means what they want to make it mean. And it means that they're going to be putting in roadblocks so that every activity that you have is going to require government approval. Now, out of this 1992 meeting, so we have the first one in 1972, the booster shot in 1987, and now we're to 1992. In Rio de Janeiro, the United Nations created 3 treaties and a soft law document, which we will get to. That is what Agenda 21 is, a soft law document. These 3 treaties are called the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, which we will go over each of these in a moment and see what each one of them is all about. And the second is the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the third is the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. The combat desertification, you might think, my goodness, wouldn't that be great? They will go into deserts and they will invent things like drip irrigation systems, and we will see the deserts bloom. I've seen that happen, and I know where that drip irrigation was invented. It was invented in Israel, and it's a beautiful thing. They're growing apple trees in the desert, but that's not what this is about. This is not what this is about at all. As a matter of fact, look at this. It grants the UN control over natural resources and controls the use of 70% of the Earth's land. That's what the Desertification Treaty was all about. And it was signed by Clinton in 1994, and then it was ratified by the US Senate in 2000. Why? Well, because it was in a package of 34 treaties, and the doofuses didn't even read it. A friend of mine called his senator afterwards and said, "What are you doing? You just ratified the desertification treaty." He said, "No, we didn't, I swear we didn't." And then he went and said, "Oh, we did. We didn't know it. But you know what? We can get at it. It just takes the will of the Senate. The will of the Senate. So that's a question you can ask these Senate candidates who want to go up and join John Cornyn. Okay? Are you going to be going after the repeal of all these executive orders? Did you hear the new one today? Diversity. He's going to implement diversity in all federal branches of government. Duh. I thought we had that already. Anyway, so that was the first one, desertification. The second one, is the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. This one, unfortunately, was signed in Rio de Janeiro by George H.W. Bush as our president. Then it was ratified by the U.S. Senate the same year in 1992. And that was the one then that led to the Kyoto Protocol, which gives us the greenhouse gas caps. And those caps, of course, on greenhouse gas emissions, and only on 37 out of 193 UN nations. So it truly is a redistribution of wealth from the 37 developed nations to the rest of the nations that they consider undeveloped. And it was signed by President Clinton before he left office, and it was unsigned by President George W. Bush. The third treaty that came out of that 1992 Earth Summit is called the Biological Diversity Treaty, and it was set for approval without any opposition at all on the floor of the U.S. Senate. And a friend of mine who had just finished his doctorate in doing this very map by the name of Michael Kaufman from Bangor, Maine, had figured out that what the Biodiversity Treaty was after is all of the red areas that you see here are off limits to humans. The humans would live only on little islands of land and be surrounded by wild. As a matter of fact, we would be rewilding much of America. As a matter of fact, so many people who think that Jeb Bush is a great potential next president, folks, he was destroying homes in Florida in order to rewild the Everglades. So look into this. Palenti, and I'm glad he's gone, he's also a greenie. So anyway, just be careful. But anyway, this treaty was set for final approval, and Michael Kaufman went into Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, showed it to her, had all the arguments all ready for her, showed her the map. She said, yeah, I'll go out on the floor and I'll talk your arguments. And she did, and it went down. It's never been brought up again. So 2 of those 3 treaties are already law. This is the Agenda 21, the soft law document. Now, what is the difference between a treaty and a soft law document? Soft law doesn't have to go through Senate approval. So it's very easy to take hold of it. Most international law, we've got at least one lawyer sitting here over here, John can correct me if I'm wrong in this. Most international law is soft law because they're not things that have gone through our legislative system. But they are international in nature. And Agenda 21 is one of those. It's a soft law document. It's not something that's gone through our legislative process. It has never been approved. So, with the next slide. What happened with Agenda 21 is that who was in the White House after President George H.W. Bush signed and got ratified that 1992 treaty, 1993, Bill Clinton gets into office. And here's what happened. He created, with executive order, the President's Council on Sustainable Development. The President's Council on Sustainable Development. And it took all of these notions out of Agenda 21 and implemented them here. Let's look at our next slide because it gives you the we believe statements. There were 16, and you can just hear the silver-tongued Bill Clinton talking about these things. And I don't know about you, but I gag every time I even think of hearing that voice. But anyway, what they said that they believed, and there's 16 points in the we believe statement concerning the President's Council on Sustainable Development. One of them was, we need a collaborative decision-making process. Let me explain that. Right now, we have a bottom-up process. And thank God for the Tea Parties, because you understand your responsibility. It's been there all along. You're involved because you're scared, and thank God you are there. And I have to tell you, for somebody who's been out there since the earth cooled, I'm so glad to see so many new people involved in all this. But it is not a bottom-up process. It's not we the people get together and decide we want a bike path or a hiking trail. Instead, these little muckety-mucks up here decide they want it, and they ran it through to the local level. So that's what the collaborative decision process does. Another point is integrated policies to achieve national goals. Well, I don't really want national goals coming down from the top like that. If it's not from we the people, I'm not interested. Thank you very much. Another one of the points is stabilizing global human population. You know, if there weren't so many people, it would be so much easier to control. You know, people are the problem. You ask most of these guys out there, not Kiso, but the others. The others. Where are your commissioners tonight? They ought to have been here. Okay. All right. And then the last point, we're talking about interdependence of economic prosperity and environmental quality and social equity. So again, you have sustainable development, the economic, social, and environmental. Those are the three pillars of sustainable development. And you can interchange the word justice or equity. And it's imposed from the top down with a collaborative decision-making process. This further explains it. You have no choice in who represents you in this collaborative decision-making process. There's no agreement, but there is an absence of expressed opposition. Have any of you been to meetings where you have been facilitated? Oh, I love these. My city councilman decided he was going to facilitate us a few years, not that many years ago. So I decided, well, I wanted to go because they were going to put on the ballot bond packages, and it was a matter of discussing how much the bond package will be. And so I don't remember the exact numbers now, but here's what happened. There were many of us who went to that town hall meeting, and then they broke us up into small groups, and they put a facilitator over each of the groups. And then the facilitator found out what we all had in common, what makes us feel good. I like bright yellow pictures of sunflowers on the wall, you know, this kind of things. Now, what do you want to pay for in a bond package? What do you want to pay for? And so they go through and they try and convince everybody. Anybody who disagreed with anything, they singled them out and said, you're a problem. And they said it in such a way that you felt very embarrassed and ashamed if you disagreed with anything they had to say. So through that process, I knew this game. So I was quiet. And then it came time for lowering the boom. Everybody was supposed to, in their little group, say, how much do you want to be the bond package on the ballot? And I don't remember the numbers, as I say, but just say it was either 25 million or 50 million. Well, if you say 25, you're a cheapskate. And they made you feel intimidated into wanting the 50. And then they came to me. And so, Cathie, what would you want to see on the ballot? I said, 0, you have not built your case. And as I was walking out that night, there was a man who had a degree in city planning, and he said, I wish we'd talked before. I didn't know I could say 0. But you're right, they didn't make their case. So that's what they do in this. And I've watched it time and time again at UN meetings. They don't take votes. They intimidate people into silence. They have a foregone conclusion, and that's what they walk out with. The big guys, like George Soros and Maurice Strong, and Ban Ki-moon, who is now the Secretary General, you can remember his name, Ban Ban. Anybody watch the Flintstones, you can remember Ban Ban. Okay, the next one. Now, what they came out with then was this 1,400-page document called Smart Growth, and it was a federal grant to the American Planning Association that came up with this. And the common theme is government control of land use with no regard for private property rights. The next slide, please. And of course, that goes against our Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. But to give you, in a nutshell, what their attitude is toward property rights, it comes right out of a 1976 UN document in its preamble to a meeting called Habitat 1. In the preamble it says, land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset, controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth. and therefore contributes to social injustice. Public control of land use is therefore indispensable. That is, in a nutshell, exactly the philosophy of what is behind Agenda 21. And where you went to. And then there are 5 model statutes that they have presented for state laws in order to implement this. And so you see, it's all coming from the top down. It was the UN, it was the executive order, and now they've come up with all of these wonderful state laws. These are model laws, and so doesn't every state want this? And I can tell you in the state of Texas, we do not have this. However, I did just learn yesterday, anybody know about smart meters or have a concern about smart meters? That the PUC in 2005 did pass that. It was before any of us were keen to the idea. We didn't know what smart meters were. And of course, what smart meters are, for those of you who haven't caught on to that yet, it's a way of government surveillance of how much energy you use in your home, and ultimately controlling how much energy you use in your home. The cap and trade that someone by the name of John McCain wanted, remember that? Cap and trade, it's actually a cap and trade on each home. That's ultimately what can be done with this. And it's state law, and every house is supposed to have them by 2012. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and I think if there is one enemy of an energy-producing state like Texas, it's the EPA. I am so weary of this organization. I'd love for every congressman to swear he's going to get elected, go in and get rid of the EPA. And going back, Kelly Shackelford, bless his heart, he and I have been on the National Platform Committee the last 3 national conventions. And each time, the poor man has been put on the Education Subcommittee. I get to deal with things like this, the environmental issue, and I get to kick shins and have lots of fun battling. But he has been on the Education Committee. And remember, a subcommittee, you remember when Ronald Reagan ran on doing away with the U.S. Department of Education, which was a payback to the teachers' unions that got Jimmy Carter elected. And so he couldn't get it done. He found out that the unions were much stronger than even he was able to deal with. But anyway, so I would love to do away with the Department of Ed as well, but EPA, we can take them on first. How about Commerce? How about a few other federal bureaucracies? We want to start cutting the diet of the federal government. Hey, there's lots of places to start. But anyway, they have stakeholder groups and these visioning and challenge grants that they give, and they use the facilitation, the facilitating process again for sustainable development. And again, just so that you understand this, in case you are ever in a place where they try to facilitate you, understand, identify what residents treasure in their county and what they want as a future of their county. And then they seek to clarify and resolve any differences. And then they build a broad commitment among citizens, public, private, and nonprofit sectors. And I can remember when something called outcome-based education came in, and the former Democrat chairman for Dallas County, Sandy Kress, who ended up going to work for George W. Bush in the U.S. When he was president even, came in, and this is exactly the process that he used. And so many of my Republican friends would say, you know, I know Sandy was a Democrat chairman, but man, he came in with so much common sense. What had happened was that they had been facilitated, and they didn't want to go against the grain. And so they went along with the process. The next one. This is the group that is the most onerous of all. As a matter of fact, they were so effective at the local level, implementing different radical environmental ideas through intimidation, that the UNEP, the UN Environment Program, called them up and asked them to come in. And now, of course, they suffer no lack of money. Because I can't tell you how many people will give money to the World Wildlife Fund because they like the cute little panda, you know, or the Sierra Club. You know, all these things that people are just taken in by, all because they haven't been to enough Tea Party meetings to figure it out. But anyway, this is ICLEI, and in its very title, you ought to see the problem. International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. How can an international plan get to the local level? Well, through intimidation from NGOs. And this is a non-governmental organization. And around the UN, this is what you hear about all the time. There are 600 American communities who have agreements with them. And I've just done a lot of research on this group and its history. Of course, they're all radical Greenpeace, kind of people. And by the way, Bolivia has just passed a resolution in their own country, and now is trying to get the UN to pass the same resolution that gives trees the same rights as humans. I mean, we are not, I can't make this up. This is just too bizarre to even make up. But anyway, they give counties and they give cities a computer program, free, of course. Why do they have to worry about money? Your tax dollar is going to the UN and they're funding it. And going to these environmental crazies as well. But anyway, so they get free programs, and some of the counties are innocently then taken in by this. And there are a number of different ways that they're taken in. One is that they might just get this program and look at it and say, wow, wouldn't that be great if we had bike trails, for example. Well, they're having this battle over in the city of Arlington, Texas right now, where the people have gone, yeah, you've seen it online, people have gone door to door even and asked their neighbors, do you want a bike trail in front of your house? And the people say no. The majority of people don't want it. So they go before the city council, and the city council gavels and said, time's up. Yep, bike trail goes in. You're paying for it. So this is just, again, this is the collaborative decision-making process. It is not the American democratic process of government from the bottom up. It's from the top down. And also every city and every community wants to get stars. You know how we were in kindergarten. Our kindergarten teacher gave stars if we were good that day. Well, that's what they want. I remember back, again, after the earth cooled, I was on the Human Service Commission for the city of Dallas. And there was a black physician who was the chairman of that committee. And he so desperately wanted Dallas to have on its stationery a healthy city. I said, well, why do we want to be a healthy city? How much does it cost? Who designates us a healthy city? What do we get for it? And he said, I don't have answers to those questions, so I'll make you the ad hoc chairman of that committee. Well, I every month would just go back with more and more questions and more things that I had found out until it finally swirled down the toilet. So that was fun. But anyway, so that's what you can do with some of these things. Now, Barack Hussein Obama was just yesterday back on the campaign trail in our very expensive bus that was built not by American workers, but by Canadian workers, right? Okay, and there was a farmer who seemed to be very genuine, and he had concern because he's been hearing about new rules and regulations. So Obama asked him, well, do you have something specific in mind? And the man said, well, no, he didn't. And so Obama's response was, well, I don't believe everything we hear. Well, folks, here's what he just did on June 9, 2011. Just not even 2 months, 2 full months ago. Yes, 2 months ago. And it establishes a White House Rural Council. And under the Department of Agriculture, you have the Department of Defense. He's going to send the military out to make that farmer get a license to drive a semi-trailer in order to drive his tractor to do plowing. That's exactly what is required in this thing. It's exactly what is required. The Department of Treasury, Department of Justice, Department of Interior, Department of Commerce, Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, HUD, Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, the next one. Department of Education. Of course we've got to brainwash the kids with all this, right? Well, what this does, and you can see over 25 different cabinet level and executive branch departments and agencies are to implement this. Why? Because as you saw that biodiversity treaty, we're supposed to live stacked up. They don't even want us living in suburbia. They want us to live stacked up. And yes, and not driving cars, but getting on either rail, which is extremely expensive, so much more expensive than building a new road. And so now, if they're going to do this to people who live in urban areas, then what are they going to do with 16% of the people who live in the rural areas? And this is exactly what this is. It's more government control. Every activity that those farmers want to have, they will have to get approval from the federal government. And this is just one example from the Department of Interior, but there were a couple of congressmen from, I think, Montana and South Dakota, who, in the budget deal, were able to shut off Ken Salazar's money in the Department of Interior from rewilding areas and preventing grazing in a lot of federal lands. And unfortunately, there are some states who have much of their land. Even, I think it's Utah, that about 80% of their land is federal government owned. And then the federal government, of course, can come in and tell them what they can and can't do on their property. So it's a very bad system. But anyway, we'll end with a couple of what you can do. Always be polite and respectful. And we're Texans, we know how to be polite and respectful. And before going to elected officials, there's a booklet that I believe is going to, yes, it is going to be made available to you tonight. Read that, because the things that I've gone over tonight, I know there's been a lot of information, but you can have in writing most of these points. It's written, just so that you know this as well, by a friend of mine by the name of Henry Lamb, who has been following the UN for more years than I can even tell you. It's just, he was involved, well, I went to my first meeting in 1995. Henry told me I had to go to Kyoto, Japan in 1997, to which I responded, what for? I don't know anything about that. You'll learn, he said. You must go. So Henry has been very, very important in the whole movement of following the UN before any of us understood what their tentacles were going to eventually be doing. And it's rarely productive to mention the UN. If you go into an elected official and you say, you're implementing the UN's agenda, they'll think, you're seeing black helicopters. They won't understand where you're coming from. And they don't understand how ickly some contract that they may have has brought these things in from, ultimately from the UN. Instead, focus on the protection of private property rights, free markets, and development and implementation of any land use plan. Also, read your local proposal, if you have one, and find its links to Agenda 21 and to the President's Council on Sustainable Development. See if the plan is mandated by state law. I don't believe it is in Texas, unless, again, the smart meters, I did find that yesterday. And why is the plan being considered? What you'll typically find is that someone has gone to one elected official and given them an idea that they think, oh my goodness, I could run for re-election on that. Isn't that a great idea? Everybody's going to love this idea. And so they've innocently gotten into it. But even, let me give you an example in one county in Texas that was so sad. County commissioners wanted to replace some leaking septic tanks, a very good thing to do, and you would want them to be able to do. And so they thought, well, we'll see if we can get a grant from the federal government to do this. Well, they got the federal government grant, all right, but in the application of that grant, they had to reveal what went through the county or river, what happened along that river, cattle grazing. And so all of a sudden, the feds are coming down and saying, you cannot have cattle here because this is a watershed, and they'll be creating pollution in that river, and then this is going to be just awful, so you're going to have to get those cows out of here. To which the people said, say what? And Hays County is dumped Italy as a result. So that's a very good thing. And I understand that Garland just got rid of Italy as well. So find out why it's being considered, who's guiding the plan into development. And one other city in Texas that I've been to, there was a county commissioner that was approached by one of the people of Italy, and very innocently and naively he got into a friendship and then ended up getting into promoting these ideals, and he didn't even realize what was happening to him. And once the people got a hold of it, then the pushback came, and he totally let go of it. How and why was the person or agency guiding the plan chosen? How will the plan be enforced? How much will the implementation cost? And how will the funding be provided? So when you start hitting the economics, you start hitting the property rights, you start approaching the people who are involved in this, what you'll find is that 99.9% of the time the people are really well-meaning. They didn't know what they didn't know. And so sit down and reason together. And that's the way that you will resolve any different conflicts. And I'm looking forward to Q&A.
My name's TJ. This is kind of half comment, half question. Very interesting information that you just put out. My comment or question is, it seems to me, and what I've been looking at recently, is the educational system for our kids and what they're becoming. Because even if we all fix this right here, right now, in 20 years, my daughter can change that. And with the kids that are coming out of the high schools now, they're going to change anything that we fix right now. And we're in the most conservative state and one of the most conservative cities in the country. And I can tell you, just looking at the two girls coming out of my family and the high school that they're coming out of Plano. So I guess one of the things I'm saying here is, there's a lot of things that are important besides the here and the now. This is very important, and yes, we got to deal with it. I do not deny that. But the other thing you got to look at is where the kids' education coming from. What are we doing with the state board of education and our legislatures to fix, what kind of citizens we're going to have in the future? And Bill Ames is here tonight talking about education and certain things. There's a lot of things that have been fixed, but next year we're looking at going from a very conservative state board of education, flip-flopping back to where we were 10 years ago, and all the good that's been done is going to get undone if we don't fix that.
Well, let's pin the tail on the donkey. Bert Solomons, the chairman of that redistricting committee, did, I think, a criminal act to our state board of education. And I'm furious over it. And who appointed him? Joe Strex. Folks, I mean, this is absolutely bizarreville that this has happened at a time when so many record numbers of people came out and elected 101 Republicans in that state house.
Ken Paxton's a local.
Yes, I know Ken Paxton's a local, and he's a good man. And I'm so sorry for the jellyfish that we saw, who other people elected. Go up, and every one of them was promised a committee chairmanship or some other nonsense. Right now, first of all, let me also back up and say one other thing. The first time I ever testified before the State Board of Education, it was on one of these kind of books. And they said, they're calling this a science book, and there's no science in it. It was an amazing, and I mean, we're talking over 20 years ago. And so this has been happening for a long time. Yes, it is true that the next generation, we've seen that also in social issues. And one of the reasons why we knew that we had to, for example, get the marriage definition as a constitutional amendment in the state of Texas between a man and a woman, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, kind of thing. But the reason why we knew we had to hurry is because the next generation has been brainwashed in the public schools. Right. And they're coming out with all these weird ideas. Let me also just tell you that someone by the name of John Kerry, married to that woman Heinz, with a Heinz ketchup, they were in this meeting in Rio de Janeiro, and they came out and they had a different mission. It was to go to the chancellors of all the universities across the country and get them to buy into sustainable development, define it as we go along, as you've seen. And so from the university level on down, and now those university level teachers, of course, have produced these students who are now teaching in our classrooms, even down to the elementary level. But, through the grace of God, He is still on His throne. And no matter what kinds of good things happen in our lives or bad things happen in our lives, prayer changes things, and miracles happen. In the meantime, I think that we have a responsibility, not just in our government, but certainly in our homes. And I hope that your wife also is right there with you and lifting you up as the head of your home and teaching the truth. God put this earth on its axis, and it's going to stay there. We're not going to burn it up, and we're not going to kick it off. But I think that one day He's going to come back and do some pretty miraculous things. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to ask a question before I forget what I'm talking about, and then I want to make a comment on what you were talking about. Bilderberg. Bilderberg Conference and the Bilderberg Group, that's my question. Explain it. And who all is involved and who has, been there. So on and so forth. Okay. And the other thing is, she is so right. Bert Solomon's is a disaster. And wherever we go, we need to get him out of the state legislature next time. But we need to get Strauss out first. And people say, well, you can't. He's got too much money, all this sort of stuff. He comes from San Antonio, so on and so on. Go to San Antonio. Get rid of him there. You know? You're going to have to spend the money or the time or something to get rid of him there. Because he does have a lot of power and shenanigans and whatever.
And his spokesman is Karen Hughes.
And what?
His spokesman is Karen Hughes.
No kidding.
And I'm not sure why.
Well, you know which wing of the Republican Party. I'm sorry, I may step on some toes, but I was a out of the closet Rick Perry supporter. And I was replaced with a man who was in the closet, Kay Hutchinson supporter. And I can tell you that there is a huge divide in the state between conservatives and rhinos.
Amen.
And whether you like it or not, Rick Perry's at the top of the heap with that conservative side. And these other people, I don't know who you would say now is at the top of the rhino side. It is Kay Hutchinson until she's out of office.
David Dewhurst, Joe Strauss, and Steve Wooster.
Well, anyway, as far as the Bilderbergers is not a good group. It is a globalist group, and many people are hyper critical of it, and also of council and foreign relations. These kind of things that a lot of my friends talk about and dwell on, and they believe that it is just a quick check off. If anybody has been to a meeting or knows somebody who's a member of something, that they're disqualified. I am one of those who goes toe to toe with somebody. I have disagreed with Rick Perry on a couple of things. The HPV vaccine. Now, I mean, I spent a week's supposed vacation in Cozumel and spent $1,000 on my cell phone fighting it with Fox News and everybody else around the country. And so, I fought that. But you know what? He's not a sore loser. He says, I didn't listen to enough voices. No, he didn't. And so he's made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. As far as the Bilderberg, he did go to a meeting in 2007. He was invited and he went. Why did he go? What did he get out of it? I have not seen in all the battles I've been, on his side, not on his side, whatever, in Austin, Texas, that's had any impact on him. I think one of the things that I would love to put in my 2 cents worth about who is the real Rick Perry as well. I have known the man for enough years since he's elected to anything in Texas, and I have been with him in meetings at breakfast in the governor's mansion before it was burned. And I've been with him in the New York Times Square, I think they call it the Foursquare Church or something like that in New York City during the national convention that met there. I've been with a man when he's reading the prayer of Jabez. I've been with a man when he prays over his meal. And I've seen him give his testimony. And I think that's who he is. Do we agree on everything? No, but I've been married 42 years and I don't agree with my husband on everything either. But anybody else comes against my husband and you're going to have me to battle with. So, you just, you roll with the punches in politics, and it's a really awesome arena. It really is. And what a privilege we have. But one other thing that I really grieve over the youth coming up who would wear these terrible t-shirts like we saw in this presentation, is that these young people don't know what they are putting on the altar, what they're giving up. And I saw a movie a number of years ago called China Cries, and if you can find it in some video shop, I would recommend it, because it was a girl who disagreed with her parents because her parents didn't like the mayo jackets and they didn't like the cute little shoes, and she said, I think they're kind of nice, you know, and she liked all these things. And then as time went on, and China was totally succumbed to communism, and people were killed who got out of line and so on, she certainly learned. And I hope and I pray that our country doesn't have to get to that point. I think, you know, from a Christian point of view, I'm hoping that the rapture of the church happens, you know? And then all those kind of things can happen because that's what the Antichrist is going to do. It seems to me that the UN is a perfect platform for the Antichrist. So just so much for my 2 cents worth. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you for being here, Cathie. I've enjoyed everything you said. I have a question about the smart meters. I understand they're to be installed in North Texas this year, or in 2012, and I also understand that they can cause fires and run your air conditioner and a number of other things. Can we opt out of that by writing registered letters? I understand they have to be registered to our utility provider, and they will not install them. Otherwise, it will be installed on your house.
I believe that that is correct. However, I think that they have a law saying that every house has to have one. But I do not believe that they can force it on you, number one, and I think that you would have a very good legal case if someone tried to force that on you. There are people who have things, and I know that when you get into your Agenda 21 project, you're going to be finding out a lot more things about that. But people who have insulin pumps because they're wireless technology, people who have pacemakers because it's wireless technology, that many of them have had a conflict with them. And so it is also a health hazard. So we have to be careful about these things for sure.
Cathie, Barbara Marlis. I can testify that you have been in this since the earth cooled.
I know. I just love it. I'm Irish. I guess that's it.
Yes, I think we had a telephone conversation. I think it was back in 1994. You were on the Marlon Maddox show, and you and I had a conversation, and you opened my eyes to the outcome-based education, and you helped me immensely.
Oh, awesome.
And I sincerely want to thank you for that. I read my kids out of public schools. We were blessed enough to put them in private schools. So, yeah.
I hope you're reaping the benefits of that.
Oh, yes, and they are. They're launched. So I am reaping now.
Awesome.
But I just don't understand. You're just going to have to talk to me a little bit more about Rick Perry because of the eminent domain and all of the other issues that so many of us are beginning to understand because we're starting to get involved in Austin, and we're starting to see how we're ignored. How, you know, they can't be any smarter than I am. I know they've got to know what's going on because I know what's going on. How do you think that we should address, these issues then if we keep sending the same people to Washington, we keep repeating the same actions?
Well, I think that you should weigh out Rick Perry with the other candidates, first and foremost. And if you find that Michelle Bachmann is better qualified, then choose Michelle Bachmann. If Herman Cain, then choose Herman Cain.
Ron Paul.
No.
I'm Ron Paul's
and so, giving nukes to Iran and I'm sorry. That just makes horrible things happen to me. But as far as the way I see the race, I think that Romney is the kingpin. And, if you want somebody who's anointed, he's the one who's anointed. And you want somebody who's got a record that you don't like, it's him. The rest of them, I think that you're going to have work to do. Every one of them. Let me just also add, I said what I had done about the HPV vaccine. As far as eminent domain, I was out on the forefront on that thing. I put together, as I typically do, a PowerPoint, and I was showing people what the Trans-Texas border was all about and where it came from. It came from NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And when that happened, and because of the increase in trade and the increase in exports and imports, we had more traffic on our roads. At that time, again, he was not listening to the right voice, in my opinion. And I don't want to be real mean because the man has passed away at this point. But he put Rick Williamson in over TxDOT. And Rick Williamson was a good friend of his, and they, been at the wars in the legislature together and so on. And he considered him a conservative until an audit was done on TxDOT. And oh my goodness, was it fun to be down there testifying before that state senate committee on that day against public-private partnerships and listening to the audit committee present just the disarray of the Texas Department of Transportation. And so I think it is eternal vigilance in all of these things. I exposed all of these, football, field-wide plans that they had, and I didn't agree with it at all. But again, we won that one, just like we won the HPV. And there's only one person left that I know of, and it's Terry Hall out of San Antonio. It is kept alive in her mind, and she keeps writing about it, and she gets printed because she's a good writer. But I couldn't disagree with her more. The Trans-Texas Corridor is dead. Now, we still do have public-private partnerships. Centra is still building roads in our state. But you know what the rest of the story is? We have got so many people moving into the state every day. Any of us who travel Dallas to Austin or, wherever else you travel, see the need that we have for roads. How are we going to pay for them? Who's going to pay for them? I've gone again and again and again back to the well, and I said, quit pilfering the money out of the Texas Department of Transportation and quit pilfering the money out of the Texas Mobility Fund. And that'll help. And I don't know that anything has been done with that. But you know what? People keep sending back these doofuses into Austin, Texas. And so as long as we've already said tonight, you have a Joe Strauss as a speaker, and you have a Senate that's a good old boys club, except for Brian Birdwell and Ken Paxton. Well, I hope Ken Paxton. Wouldn't that be great? Ken Paxton run for the Senate. That would be great. But Brian Birdwell did a good job. Dan Patrick did a good job, and Jane Delaware does a good job. But the rest of those people, are not conservatives at all. It's a good old boys club over there. But you've got to work with what you got. And as far as I'm concerned, the only person with a lot of things going for him in the right way, who can knock off Romney, is Rick Perry. And so, that's where I've come down, where I am on that. But did I ever agree with him on HPV? Did I ever agree with him on eminent domain and
Immigration.
on the immigration? That one is on Sanctuary City. He made it one of his priorities during the legislative session. He put it on the special call during the special session.
And what did he do to make it pass?
He worked hard for it, and the same thing as far as Islam is, but he's got to work with Strauss and Dewhurst. I'm sorry, I just see two weaklings there. Again, I'm talking very frankly. But
Can you expand on Islam?
yeah, as far as Islam is concerned, there's one man. Oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of the name of the website. That someone did a good pro and con objective of that. I'm going to be meeting with them in about a week and a half now, and I'm going to be asking about that very issue because that is crucial to me. The Muslim Brotherhood is absolutely alive and well in Plano, Texas, with Mohammed El-Biari, or whatever his name is, who has threatened me, by the way, and tried to get me disinvited to places. But anyway, I don't have an answer about his whole coming and going on the issue of Islam. But I know how he was thinking when he went to Israel. He saw the land. He talked to the key people, including Bibi Netanyahu. And I was, pretty impressed. And as a Christian, I think that he understands that they are the apple of God's eye, the Jewish people. So I don't see him doing the holding of hands, as George Bush did. But I hope that I'm right in that. I just hope that I am. And I may not be. And I think you may disagree with me. What? Go ahead. You said.
Do you have any more questions?
I don't have a question, but I could give you 2 websites for people to copy down if they want to know about smart meters. They have an abundance of information about smart meters. So if you want to write these down, if you're interested, I think it's imperative that you know more about it before they put this on your house. And there are ways to get out of it. They have some examples of documents drawn up by lawyers that you could use to try to get a waiver for this. So anyway, the first website is called refusesmartmeters.com. The second one is emfsafetynetwork.org. So check those out. And they have a flyer, like I printed this off. You could give it to your friends, and it has these two websites at the bottom and some other information. Okay.
Any other? Okay.
I just want to say I was looking into Agenda 21 about 18 months ago, and it's so mind-boggling. And I think it is definitely in Plano. Even if you get rid of Ickley, I think some of the cities are still adopting Agenda 21 now. And I know Agenda 21 is in the public schools because Plano have connected math, which they fought for, and that is an Agenda 21 item. So where do we, I know you went down the list, but where do we start? Because I know the NLC, National League of Cities, and the NCTCOG, if you read their visions, you can, the Agenda 21 seems to be in their Vision 2050 for North Texas. So how do we, it's so overwhelming, where do we start?
Yeah, I think that is going to be something that you, as a board, putting your minds together, will find that you'll need to, rather than just going out there with buckshot and trying to capture all of it, maybe you'll take on the smart meters only. Or maybe there's some other aspect of it that you'll see that you think is more even important. In Arlington, of course, it's going to be the bike trails and the hiking paths. Linda Harper Brown, a Republican from Irving, I know, had a piece of legislation this last session trying to implement those. And it was turned back. But that's very problematic to me. And so I think that you will find something that is most applicable in your area. If they have not started putting in smart meters yet, that might be just the place to start.
You were talking about everything initiating from top down versus juxtaposed to bottom up.
Right.
And Texas is one of the few red states that does not have initiative and referendum, whereas you can take a survey and then bring an issue to a ballot. Why does it always get nixed in the Republican state committees?
Because in the beginning, the whole idea of initiative and referendum had a lot of positive impact in states. And in some states, it still does. Like the state of Oklahoma, for example. The people there are really quite conservative. And they've done a very good job in electing their state house and Senate, and so they have initiative and referendum, and they have kept a close control of it. You go to another state like California, and it's bizarre. There's so many initiatives on a ballot that the people get lost on. They don't even care what's on it. It's rather like in the state of Texas, we have the constitutional amendments, and we're going to have, I think it's what, 11 or 15 on the 10 on the ballot in November. And over the last several elections, people have gone in and voted for every one of them. And some of those have been concerning things like roads. And I just think it's very, very difficult in mass to educate people about what is on the ballot. We have a hard time with getting people getting people to understand people, who the players are on there. To have the initiative process would be difficult. The only other thing I'll say, and I'm going to come from the negative side of this, obviously, not because I don't think that the philosophy should work, and not that I can't see, like in the state of Oklahoma, where it has worked, but what it's also become is he who has the most money to get it on the ballot, because you have to have enough signatures to get something on the ballot, then they are the ones who get their language on there. Another thing they do when they get their language on there is they distort the language, so you have to vote against something that you're really voting for. So it gets very, very complicated. It's a good idea, but it's just really hard for one who has spent almost 30 years educating voters. It's so frustrating, to just not see more victories.
It does seem odd that we're one of the few red states that doesn't have that opportunity.
Well, if the people choose it and they lobby their legislators, then it could happen.
Well,
And
if
cities,
get it out of the committee at the Republican National Committee or state committee.
the state convention. Well, yeah. Well, that again, it's a process. Every state executive committee member puts a person on each of the committees, and so if that is something that is a priority to you, then you can work that angle of it and get it in the platform.
Thank you.
Hi, Cathie. My name is Charlene. I have a comment on something that you talked about this evening, where President Obama, I guess there's 25 or 26 things that he has implemented in this agriculture thing with all the different departments. Just to let you all know, if you didn't see it today, on Megyn Kelly, American Life on Fox, they had an interaction between the president and that gentleman who's a farmer.
Yes.
And he was asking Obama to please stop with the regulations and stop with all the paperwork. He said, we want to get up in the morning and go out and plow our fields and grow our crops. That's what we're interested in doing, rather than filling out all kinds of forms, excuse me, and doing all those kinds of things. Then Megyn Kelly had an interaction between two people. One was from the EPA, and here's the statement. I'm still stunned because of the stupidity. And here's what was said. The EPA is going to regulate dust. Dust that is stirred up from the combines and these huge plows that look like they're as wide as this room that they ride on these tractors and plow up. They're going to regulate dust. Now, you go figure how they're going to do that. But I'm telling you, this woman that was all for it from the EPA, she had her little figures all going out there, and it made absolutely no sense. I'm like scratching my head. And Megyn Kelly said, this is the first time I've ever had a discussion about regulating dust.
Does she consider dust a pollutant? Oh, so that's how she would. Yeah, interesting.
Any more questions, comments?
They're going to cut the amount of dust in half.
Okay, we got 1 minute. So let's turn it back over to Andy.
Thank you, God bless y'all.
Okay, got a couple of closing announcements here. Dennis is going to get our slides up, hopefully. because we have all those reminders on the slides, right? So we go Bill Ames, we got Q&A. There we go, next one. Okay, so how many of you know that the Texas senatorial candidates who are vying for Kay Bailey Hutchinson's seat, most of them are showing up October 1st at Collin College for a forum to answer your questions. Anybody know that? Okay, so you need to pre-register. I found this out this past week. You need to go to the website, and that website address was in the last meeting announcement. Register, and you also need to submit questions beforehand. Those questions need to be submitted by September 15th.
When you can submit a question, when you register.
You can submit a question at the time you register. Please return your name tags on the way out. Talk with your steering committee members so that we get feedback on what's working well and what's not in these meetings. Oh, okay. Okay.
If anyone would like to email me or get my email from somebody, Andy or anybody, I can email you the website for the response. It's going to be on your website, on this particular website, until the end of August. And on this thing that I'm going to would email you also, there's a Champion the Vote for Christians to go and to be a part of a group that will get out the vote. And it's going to be a Christian organized situation. And then there's another section where you can pray for your leaders, and it will give you each day. It will give you another leader, like it was Justice Supreme Court Justice Breyer this time today, and so on and so forth. Anyway, that will be available until just the end of August, though. So if you wanted to go back and see what the content of the response that Governor Perry did announce and push, by the way, the American Family Association was really the one that sponsored that. It was just announced by Governor Perry. So if you would like to see what went on down there in Houston and did not get to go, please email me, and I will send you that, and you can look it up. Okay?
Thank you, Joanne.
Oh, and also, if you would like, I have a Rick Perry response. No, I'm sorry. There was a 14 question or 14 statement deal where somebody was after Rick Perry for 14 different things, and David Barton responded on Facebook. So you can go to David Barton's Facebook page, you might find it there. Or if you email me, I'll send you the connection.
Can you just get with Joanne afterwards? So I want to leave time for everybody to talk with Cathie after the meeting. So there's a committee sign-up sheet that should have gone around. Debbie's got it at the front door. We need a couple more people to help out on the telephone committee. Our September 1st meeting is on economics. Economics is boring, right? Well, Ed class is going to make it interesting because it's not going to be a lecture or talk. It's going to be a game. Okay, you guys are going to play the role of interacting nations and companies and individuals that are buying and selling things, and Ed is going to illustrate some of the rules of a free market. I think we forgot to recognize any candidates that are running for office this evening. Do we have any in the audience? Can you please stand up and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sharon Ramage, and I've met many of you during my last campaign, but I am running for judge of the 199th Judicial District Court on a Republican ballot primary. So I would appreciate your support and encouragement again. Met many of you last go around and are ready to bring it home this time.
Thank you, Sharon. Anybody else?
Hi, y'all. My name is John Cole. I'm not currently a candidate yet. I am looking at it. Many of y'all in Allen know this, that Ken Paxton is no longer your rep. After redistricting, you're in a whole new district, grouped in with Plano, and I'm looking at running that race again and would love to talk to all you guys, see where you're at and put conservative voice back down in Austin. Thanks.
Great, thanks, John. Okay, next slide there, Dennis. So I'm going to close with a quote from Milton Friedman. A major source of objection to a free economy is precisely that. It gives people what they want instead of what a particular group thinks they ought to want. Underlying most arguments against the free market is a lack of belief in freedom itself. And Milton Friedman wrote that in 1967 in Capitalism and Freedom. I think that goes well along with what Cathie talked about this evening. Thank you all for coming.
We got some council people on the council.
We have what?
Go ahead. Introduce yourself. Don't be shy.
Good evening, I'm Robin Sabacho, the council.
Thank you. All right, Cathie, go ahead.
I'm Debbie Stout, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, Cathie will be here. Cathie Adams will be here this evening for a little bit to answer questions and Bill Angel.